Hi, we're Paul and Barbara Worston here to talk about our son Ryan, who was diagnosed with a rare disease, malignant infantile osteopetrosis. We'll take you back to a very exciting day when Ryan was born.
Ryan was born on July 1st of 2005, and everything seemed to be just normal at the beginning. And the next day, Ryan was put in the NICU for being jaundiced. And while he was in the NICU, they ran a panel of tests and noticed that his calcium was low. So they decided to give him a bolus of calcium and hopefully send us on our way. Well, that didn't happen because his calcium level kept coming back low each time they tested it. No one could figure out where this calcium was going. So after about a week and a half, we were transferred to another hospital that had other experts to hopefully figure out what was going on with our son. Once we were sent to this other hospital, many different doctors looked at him, tested him, and did a second set of x-rays, and they noticed that his bones were considerably more dense than the first set from the previous hospital. And that's when everybody's ideas were confirmed that possibly there was more going on here than originally thought, and that he possibly had what was called malignant infantile osteopetrosis.
As first-time parents, we thought it was a blessing to get a diagnosis, and then we learned about the severity of this rare disease, which took the journey from our hometown to a major teaching hospital out in Boston.
We were told, don't look on the internet to find out what this disease was, and that they would explain things to us as we needed. We were told that less than 20 children were born a year worldwide, and that this was considered a very rare disease, and that we didn't have many options because time was running out. Either we were to take Ryan home and we would lose him, or we could try a life-saving bone marrow transplant, which also came with a lot of complications and risks. We decided that we would go to Boston and try the bone marrow transplant, because at this point, with Ryan's disease, his kidneys were being affected, his eyesight was being affected, his hearing was being affected, and because his bones were becoming more and more dense, he was beginning to break some bones. So we knew we had to do something fast. We did find a bone marrow donor right away. We were lucky enough for that. So we went right out to Boston and began the regime for doing a bone marrow transplant. It was not easy on Ryan's little body. He was very young, 2 months old, and it really took a toll on him, the chemotherapy regimen and all the different medicines they were giving him throughout to keep him out of pain and calm. His blood pressure was spiking, his kidneys were being damaged, he wound up getting what's called mucositis, he was having trouble breathing and eating. He wound up needing to go to the ICU in the hospital and wound up being put in a sleep-induced coma for 30 days. There were many times we almost lost him, and the doctors weren't sure what would happen from day to day. Thankfully, he wound up doing okay. His bone marrow transplant wound up being what's called a success. He engrafted, and slowly but surely, he wound up getting a little bit better each and every day. Well, maybe about 5 months from his diagnosis, we were finally able to go home and bring Ryan back to our home state and try to do what we needed to as a family at home.
Yeah, so the care regimens began, and occasional trips still out to Boston to do some follow-on care. And during this time, of course, Barbara had to take a leave of absence from her job. My employer allowed for a lot of flexibility, but nonetheless, I was commuting back and forth between states, so it was taking a toll, even more so than normal infant care can take a toll on first-time parents. And then, unfortunately, due to a complication from being immunocompromised, we lost Ryan the January after he was born, on the 23rd. And that's when we realized how blessed we were, not only to have been able to spend time with him, but in the relationships that we had developed in the hospital and friends here at home. And they helped us, encouraged us, and really persuaded us to begin a foundation in Ryan's memory. The Ryan Worston MIOP Foundation exists today as an organization that we founded with friends to both try to find a better cure so that there were options other than bone marrow transplants, and to support families. We were lucky. There was a very diligent social worker at the hospital who would find little areas for us to have funds for the things that we needed, the kind of necessities that a family has when they're displaced. But what we were told about was that the diagnosis really prohibited us from certain funds that were available to other patients. And that's why we knew this need existed, to bridge that gap. And so through the foundation, we've been able, through the generosity of our local community, to support patients in other states, because there's really only a few hospitals that deal in either infant bone marrow transplants, or more specifically those for malignant infantile osteopetrosis. And through this foundation, we made some great relationships. One doctor in particular who's researched this extensively in Minnesota, and he's been a great partner and supporter. And a lot of folks have since gotten bone marrow transplants with him, and due to his experience with this disease, has great statistics on the survival of his patients. But nonetheless, we carried on to fund some research in the hopes of a better cure, and continue to support families. And it's been amazing to know that despite Ryan's short life, he's impacted so many people and so many families in various corners of the country.